Welcome to Audio Branding, the hidden gem of marketing. Sound plays a more important role in human behavior and our decision-making than you may realize. In this podcast, I'll help you understand the art and science of sound so you can better influence others in business and your life. I'm your host, Jodi Krangle. Let's delve a little deeper. So how you doing, Adam? Thank you for joining me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here. And thanks for doing what you do, Jodi. The show is a gem for all of us in audio branding and the industry as well.
That.
So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate what you do too, which is why we're here. I just wanted to thank you for coming on the show and taking the time, because I know you are a very, very busy person. But the first question that I like to ask people is if you have an early memory of how sound moved you. I'd love to hear that story if you can share.
How sound moved me.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot.
We have time.
So music's played a major role in my life growing up. You know, it's always been ingrained in me. So, I remember going to as a really young kid, like even kindergarten, like going to my grandparents' house or great-grandparents' house and like just mashing the keys on their Wurlitzer organ, right? And then like mom and grandma are in the other room going like, "Sounds great, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's great." But I think
encouragement. That's what we all need, right? Yeah.
That noticed they weren't in the room with me; they were in the other room, because there's a volume pedal on that thing.
Oh yeah.
But I think that and then I think growing up a little bit more, I realized in 7th grade for a science fair, the experiment that I chose to do was the memorability of jingles. And so
really back then.
Yeah, and this
I'm impressed.
It didn't occur to me until recently that was something that interested me way back then. So I feel like it's just built in. But yeah, so we had probably a sample size of probably like 4 people in my immediate family. I'm sure that the results were outstandingly, accurate statistics that painted a really good, statistical significant picture of the marketplace and who remembers.
Well, just the idea that you were thinking of it back then. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I don't even think I got a great grade on it either. So we'll have to go back.
They didn't understand. They just didn't get it.
They weren't there yet, and I think that's part of this industry as well. Like at least I know on the States side, it's been a slow education curve at times. I think to bring some people on board. So my 7th
Canada
grade
follows suit pretty closely. I think Europe is just a little bit ahead of the curve when it comes to that.
And thank them for it. That's outstanding. Let's keep it up.
Yeah.
Good things.
It's all good. Yeah. But it's really interesting to hear that you were all up in that before you even got started as a musician, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Well, I was playing piano. I played piano. I had piano lessons through ever since I was pretty young. But yeah, and I didn't even, like I said, I didn't even think about this. It didn't even occur to me until recently, where I'm doing that same exercise in like every piece of work that we do, or using analytics and combining the creativity and data and absolutely every checkpoint along the way. It's like, that's something's in the DNA there, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So. Well, that's fantastic. I love that you started like that. But I also want to ask you how you got interested in like sound in the first place. The music definitely is where it seems to have started. But then you went from there to like, what's the transition from there to audio branding? Because it's a big gap.
Yeah. Well, it's quite the journey is, I think, with anyone, it's kind of, it takes some diversions here and there.
A long and winding road.
So I got into music first, right? So I was producing, recording, and composing music first. So I would do work for ad agencies early on. That's, you quickly as a musician, I realized that if I wanted to make money somewhere, maybe I should, try to find some, maybe some work for hire gigs or licensing stuff, and was hit or miss in that area for a while. But it worked, right? I was still pulling it off professionally. But the hustle was hard. That said, it was a blast, and but there are times where you need to go, okay, like maybe I'm having kids, and maybe I might need to make some more money, or maybe have more of a stable existence. But
musicians aren't so stable, unfortunately.
Right? Yeah. But prior to all of that, though, I've always been a tinkerer. Right, I've always taken, like, if as a child, if someone came to like fix the dishwasher or something and had parts left over, I'd ask the repair guy if I could have those, just so I could like take them apart and have something that I don't have to worry about breaking, and kind of satisfy that like curiosity of how things work. So
okay, that I'm curious, before you get too far ahead, what was the most interesting thing that you ever rebuilt?
Oh, none of them ever like got back together.
Oh, they never worked again?
Way. No. They just they went apart, and then it's like, oh man, that's a lot of destruction. And
what was the most interesting thing that you got then that you took apart?
There was one that I thought there was a switch, like the switch on an old dryer.
Okay.
That essentially it's like the one dial that takes you through the cycles. I didn't realize actually how much it was giant. Like it's like a whole, it's like a whole contraption behind this. It's like it controls all the processes. And at the time it was like just this analog circuitry. So it was cool to see like, oh, if you put the switch here, and then it triggers this, and this, and tells these different pieces all these different things to do. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. It's never going to do that again because now it's in all these pieces. But I loved that stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh yeah, never really ever worked. I was in charge of fixing all the things in our house. So like any door that was messed up or anything that needs, my chores were to be the maintenance guy. So yeah.
And did everything work again at some point in your house?
I mean, I was like 12, how great can you do? I might tighten a screw on a doorknob and maybe it'll work, but
okay.
Yeah.
At least they let you try.
Exactly. My dad would get home, he's like, great job, and then do it himself.
Okay. I love it. Yeah. Anyway,
so,
I didn't mean to derail you. I was just curious.
No. But always tinkering was my thing. It's like I've always wanted to know the details of kind of what makes things tick. And it takes to later in life looking back to go, oh, well, that's intrinsically been here this whole time. And like, that's something that I gravitate towards. And I've noticed this trend, throughout all my, all my jobs and professional life. One of the early tinkers in sound was I would put, I was like about 19, 20 years old. I grabbed a pair of little condenser microphones, like lapel mics, and put them in my ears. And I sat in a room and had like one person walk around in that room and do a couple like tasks, right, with objects in the room. And I would sit perfectly still. So I would have this binaural recording of what was happening in the room. And then we would bring someone else in the room who has no clue what was happening, or like a different day or something, and just say, hey, you got to check this out. And you'd put headphones on and listen back to that recording. And so the minute you hit play, it takes a second because you start to hear the room tone of the room. And then your brain goes, oh, I've been here before, and kind of shuts all that off. So you lose the room tone, and then you're just kind of in the room, sitting in the spot where you're at comfortably, because it sounds like the atmosphere around you. And if you close your eyes, you can hear all the things happen. And usually I'd start them off that way. And it's like, hey, just close your eyes and listen to this. It's a really cool thing. And they'll just sit there and they're like waiting for something to play. And then they'd hear a door open that's right in front of them. They'd open their eyes and tear off the headphones because the door hasn't opened and something's messed with them. And like that times any other thing we've done in the room, like someone knocking on the wall, you just watch them freak out and have this kind of separate sensory experience in a space that they're familiar with. And so that, so the immersive side, the binaural side, the perception of it all, I think has always been a curiosity as well. So
That sounds
that's yeah,
fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so yeah, we've gotten to build. Now it's great in this work is with all the immersive technologies coming out with the platforms supporting them with Dolby Atmos. On almost every platform, not almost, but a lot of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
It's
I know
getting
Sean, the guy that's running this right now,
yeah.
is really into Dolby Atmos. So
Oh,
he's been doing a lot with that. Yeah.
it's outstanding. We were just listening. We were in New York a few weeks back, listening to the Atmos room at Flux Studios there, and it is mind blowing. It sounds so cool, and it's just the fact that the entire industry, like the AirPods, are supporting it. You're going to start to have more and more of these players supporting this. That immersive part of listening, to create that better connection, to create more realism, to like make a better experience is
So is that what Dolby Atmos does? It just makes it more of a realistic experience. Can you kind of explain how that works? Because I'm not
yeah.
really sure what the difference is. I don't know if I've heard it.
Oh yeah. So it's really cool the way. So put me back in that. Let's put yourself in that kitchen, right? And you have microphones in your ears, and
Hmm.
that's it's essentially or a binaural head or something. It's essentially Atmos essentially is creating that environment digitally. In the simplest of terms, right? So you can wear headphones and listen to an Atmos mix get encoded into just your headphones binaurally. Um, Binaurally meaning, via your head. So but what's really cool about all of this is that's just the endpoint for headphones. The way Atmos works is there's I think about 128 channels of audio, like of wave files, that are your Atmos mix, and then along with each one of those is location data that plays along with the track. So in any Atmos mixing room or any like home theater, it says, in any Atmos room, you have like a wide array of speakers. You have at least seven around you, four on the ceiling, a few subs, like a lot of speakers. Like the rigs are expensive. And so in that room, it's playing it back to place them exactly where they want to place them in that room. But if you don't have those speakers, the Atmos decoder says, oh, yeah, well, we only have these 5 speakers in here. So this is where it gets placed in this room, making sure that it's accurate in all those rooms. Couple that with the ability to then create a acoustic environment in headphones. So it like creates a fake room in your headphones and then places those things using head related transfer functions. I know, super geek, according to my
Yeah, well, I
calculations.
guess, from where you hear it,
Yes.
depending on where it's coming from and hitting your head.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So using that decoder there, it can then take those immersive mixes and put them in a place that makes sense in your headphones as well. And I think that piece of it has been really game changing when it comes to making it accessible to more
Hmm.
people, which I think the staying power, for these for this immersive technology side of things is different this time versus like mix in surround sound or like let's put our ads in surround. Like, well, no one's going to
Hmm.
have all those speakers, but this tech is different, and so I think to all the people who've said I've seen this before, it's a little different. It's a little tweaked this time, and
Hmm.
not everyone's going to be in it, but I do think a bigger mass, a more critical mass, is going to not realize they are. It's just going to be a normal thing that just comes with what you've bought, and you didn't know
Sure.
you opted into that. Right now, we're opting in. At some point in time, it's going to be like, oh yeah, it's powered by what? Oh, that's whatever. It sounds cool. Um,
Yeah.
so that's exciting to me.
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Well,
yeah,
as a musician as well as an audio branding person, I imagine. But so I derailed you again. but going from becoming a musician and wanting to make a living into going into audio branding, how did that transition
yeah.
happen?
So this perfect derailment because this was a derailment for me. I took a job and I was spending a lot of time traveling. I had just gotten married and I'm like, maybe I should stay in town more. And so I took a job that my client was Procter and Gamble, and we were in charge of um, basically running a service that was removing. Now, this is going to like give you an idea of how long ago this was. That was removing the use of physical prototypes when it came to design reviews. So their physical prototypes are expensive, and so if you move to something more digital, high resolution pixel walls, we had like 3D caves with polarized glasses you'd wear to like look at store changes and things like that. And it was basically a way to get the understanding internally about what your design, how your design changes are going to affect your look in store. But then we'd also use this technology on the market research side to gain an understanding of how it's actually going to move the needle. So running that service, so I had clients, I was managing, a bucket of categories within Procter & Gamble that would then basically they were design managers and design managers and brand managers were my primary contacts. And so to go on the ride from, hey, this is what we think needs to change based on these consumer insights. This is the change. This is what it looks like on the shelf. This is how it's going to look differently on the shelf versus the recent competitive set. Then will they actually see it more? Are we actually going to see a lift in sales? Do we expect to see it on the research side? Going through that was eye-opening. And at the time, I didn't connect the dots. I just saw very, very sophisticated brands making very informed decisions in a way that removed any sort of subjectivity. Like the words I like and my favorite is were never said in those meetings, and there's a hierarchy of feedback in the meetings too. And so it was really great to get that experience in there. And it was really great to see that. Fast forward till the end of my stint in there. The opportunity was outstanding, and a music opportunity came my way that was local and at the place that I had been trying to get into for the longest time. And
you gotta take that.
So the talk to my wife of, hey, hun, I know we've got our first kid on the way, and I know I'm in a pretty stable position. I got a phone call. and the way we roll is, definitely follow your heart. And so I took the job, and it was in music for advertising, and there's a post-production aspect to it as well. So lots of audio posts for ads, some movie work, and lots of music work. So after about a year at that role, the owner had tasked me to we kind of sat down, and he was like, well, what do you see next? And I'm like, well, after spending, countless hours with creative directors and editors selecting music based on their gut, I got an idea. And I kind of laid it out of, I think I can mirror the process that we've been using, from a design think standpoint, and basically start to develop criteria or refine criteria to help people who, I don't want to say non-musical people, but people who don't compose, right? To help the creative directors and help the people who say, well, I'll know it's right when I hear it. It's like, well, I could say that about colors. I could say that about shapes. I could say that about design. I could say I'd know it when I see it about the design, but that industry has done a really great job in removing the subjectivity from those decisions.
And it's still burgeoning in audio. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, lots of great work has been done. And so we spent a lot of time. There was great, back in the day, there's like some great research of things like 5 brand dimensions that Jennifer Akers did. That was like, oh, great. Like someone's starting to make sense of how these emotions start to ladder up to to things that are measurable. And the way that things are getting measured now, I know we work closely with Veritonic, and it's a similar thing, that you're starting to be able to track emotional connection, and you start to be able to track emotional resonance. I mean, we've been doing this for a while now. But prior to it was, merely just asking questions of how you feel and when. Now people are clicking certain emotions at different times, and you can even, do all the neuro tracking if you want to be able to say like, ooh, excitement is peaking here, but it's not to this level of like, ooh, they're feeling that this is sophistication, with a, with like a hair of ruggedness. Like it doesn't, you can't get that granularity without, some sort of, qualitative, asking. But it's getting there, and it's getting close, and that's really exciting to me. And so that's essentially the path, was making those connections. And it was early. I mean, I say early, it was early for me, but like there were many others doing the same thing at the same time. And there was one day that I looked at a press release and saw someone else had put out like a similar process to what we'd been touting, and it was bought by somebody, and I'm like, oh, like so deflated. I'm like, I did this, like I've done this work. I've told no one about it. I'm like, it was just like, oh,
yeah.
Okay, cool. On the right track. Let's go.
There's room for so many of these different processes. I mean, yeah, everyone has a different way of doing it. I guess it's unique to their own business, but they all get to the same point. That's the idea.
Yeah, exactly. Like we've always prided ourselves with the combination of kind of this, art and science, the data and creativity, and but really, at the end of the day, did it move the needle? Did we achieve the goals that we wanted to achieve? And is the creative spot on? That's those two go hand in hand. And so I think finding that balance is giant. One of the first bosses, one of the first kind of producers I worked under, it was, and this wasn't much research to go into things. We were just providing music against briefs, and he always would make, as I'm pushing things to be edgier, or as we're pushing things to try to be more on trend, a lot of times he would just come in and he goes, hey, creative is good, but appropriate also matters, so find your balance of creative and appropriate, and I think you'll find that that this will be our brief to win. And we want a lot. It's just be good, but like also realize like you're not writing for you, or writing for the consumer. So finding that connection between the consumer and the brand, understanding that connection and writing to that is big. So, if there's any way to remove that subjectivity along the way, let's start upstream and do that. And, we'll win better. So that was essentially the path, right? So you see the design thinking on the sophisticated brand side, and go like, music can do this too. And your crutch of I'll believe it, I'll know it when I hear it, is just that.
Yeah.
It's a crutch. We can think smarter, we can do better. And that learning happens prior to the creation of an edit. It happens at the brand level. It happens at the strategy level. It happens, at with, possibly with the CMO, trickling down how the brand's supposed to sound. So is that when it gets in the lap of the creative director and it gets in the lap of the editors, they go, whew, good. I'm either going to dip out of this library of music that we've got, or I'm going to talk to this, to this composition house who knows how to write for the brand and get something brand spanking new that's going to work for my spot, that's going to be on brand and make my life so easy. And it's empowering at that point in time. If it's done well, there's no handcuffs, or the handcuffs are loose, or the guardrails are wide, right? And you can exist in the space, in a safe way. So, or in a creative way still, but also appropriate.
Yeah, yeah. I would imagine that it's also a little cheaper when it comes right down to it. I mean, the companies are investing in the sound. that they're going to
Yeah.
use over a period of time, and it can evolve as they evolve.
Yeah.
And, they have this directory of music that they can go to that already has their brand sound, and they don't need to go outside of that and pay for, license-free music directories every 5 seconds, because there's so much content out there now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially with big enterprises. So we do a fair amount of work with ADM. They're large company, a global food manufacturer. I think they have something like 100 or so banners underneath their name. They exist in 160 different countries.
Wow.
And so you think about the reach and the communication needs on a company that big, and in a major way, they stepped up and said, and audio was just one part of it. Like what they did from a enterprise standpoint to make their communication spot on, I will say, on equity, consistent and persistent. We worked with them to create an audio brand, and they don't do. I mean, they're out there in the world, but it's also not something that they brought. They're not a broadcast, company, but they do a lot of external communications. They do a lot of, I mean, just corporate communications even, and so they needed first off that. They needed an audio logo. They were in the middle of a brand refresh, and so it was perfect timing. And so we worked with the branding agency LPK, who was doing their brand refresh, and then also worked with the motion company on the audio brand and the logo. So from there comes, the how it spreads out to kind of create a more solid ecosystem was that catalog of like, and so we pulled basically all the content creators internally to say, what kind of music have you been using? What should we use? Like emotionally, we know from all the, workshops that we've done, like the, tones and textures workshops and all the, conversations we've had, and then the research we did internally. What textures work for the brand? What textures work from the brand theme? What has to, what melodies carry over, as part of, your who you are as a company, and how do we utilize those and iterate?
I like how you describe it as textures.
Oh yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, I've never heard it described that way.
I've learned over the years that if I use words like timbre and instruments, half the faces in the room go blank. So
oh no.
Oh yeah.
But I get it. Yeah.
It's because some people like they associate as non-musical, or like I like to listen to music, but man, you start talking to me about like how you play guitar, and they're like, I can't connect to that. So I've always used visual terms, or tactile terms that people know. So, and that's mostly in our whole process too. And you will get slapped on the wrist if you work at Play Audio Agency and you say that timbre is really nice out to a client, and it'll be a big deal. Actually, we don't do that at all, but you wouldn't get slapped on a wrist. You didn't know it. But,
oh no. Okay.
But yeah, we only no. What's of all the companies I've ever worked with, this is the probably most positive and chill, laid back, lovely bunch of people. They're talented.
I love that.
Ever. So
you got there in an interesting way, though, right? Like, weren't you with Gwyn before? Isn't that?
Yes.
So
well, Gwyn rebranded.
Did it transition into? Okay.
Yeah. So we had it was time. Clients were pulling us in a specific direction. For more agency, kind of more AOR sort of work, less production, not less production, but the production was always been there, but more upfront agency led thinking. And so it was time, along with a move from our previous building to our new space, it was time to become something new that wasn't, attached to solely a production house, because I think the perception was that there was a lot of production happening, and that work still happens here, but it's a lot of the upfront thinking stuff that we were doing that really wasn't being shown. So yeah.
Yeah.
Gwen.
Have you noticed a difference between the switch over from Gwyn to play? Have you noticed like people coming to you for more of the specific things that play does as opposed to what Gwyn did?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's definitely more on the agency sided work, and it's just better positioned, if you ask me. So that's kind of the look under the hood. I don't know how much of that we want to use.
Looking under the hood is always a good thing around here. Well, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. And if you like what you heard, why not tell a friend about this podcast? It's available in all the usual locations. Until next time.